Hi, my name is Philip Thorne of Troop 107. I am here with Tony Tonelli, CPO E8 of the U.S. Navy in the Roseville Veterans Hall in Roseville, California. It is May 13, 2006. The time is 11:44 a.m. Others present are Mr. Newitt and Thomas Smith running the camera, and Nick Wana is also present. Mr. Tonelli, what made you want to join the Navy?
The pronunciation is Tonelli.
Oh, sorry. What made you want to join the armed forces?
Well, back in the days of Depression, things were pretty rough. So when I graduated out of high school, actually I didn't actually graduate. I joined the Navy on June the 6th, 1939. As you know, those were pretty hard times. Finally, after I finished my boot camp training, I went back to Yuma, Arizona and got my diploma for graduation. Later, after I was in the Navy, I got my law degree at Santa Clara University here in Santa Clara, California.
So, can you describe some of the experiences you had at boot camp?
Yes, I can. I went through boot camp in San Diego, California, and the chief that was in charge was the chief quartermaster, who had about 19 years in the service. He was very strict, which is all right with me because I'm very strict, always have been. The only thing that I was a little perturbed with is having to clean the floor with a toothbrush. Now that gets to be quite a chore, especially when you have to work on your hands and knees. Keeping my quarters clean was no problem. I always kept my bed neat. Had any problem with that. Marching, I didn't mind the marching. The thing that I was really excited over was the graduation. They had a big parade at the parade grounds in San Diego, probably in anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people in attendance. And there were about 4 companies graduating at the same time. And this was on June the 6th in 1939.
Did you have to do any diving exercises at all since you were in the Navy?
Oh yes. We had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We had to run around. They had a track, a quarter-mile track. We started out at 1 lap at a time, and before we finished, we were doing 25 laps. I don't think I could do that now at my age, but at that time I had no problem.
So, did you use any training with firearms at all?
Yes, we had training on rifles and handguns. Also, we had training for gas treatment of gas attacks. They had a regular unit there where you went through the unit and got acquainted with how to operate your gas mask. This all was during training in San Diego.
What was the food and drink like at boot camp?
What?
What was the food and drink like at boot camp?
Food?
Yeah.
I'm really not that particular about food, so as long as it's palatable, I eat it and enjoy it.
Okay.
I might add that if there wasn't beans at one of the meals, I felt bad because I'm an avid bean eater.
Did you ever feel scared about going overseas?
Never.
So, what was it like going overseas?
Well, my overseas service was primarily on aircraft carriers. I was the flight deck. My job was to communicate with the flight deck officer via a voice tube. This was before all electronics. And then I relayed the information I received from the bridge through the voice tube to the flight deck officer, and then went back to operate the voice tube. Now, when planes were revving up, it's pretty hard to hear the bell that rang from the bridge. So the flight deck officer was Lieutenant Perrault. very strict and a little bit on the not so brilliant side. And he put me on report, one of the only times I ever put on report, because I didn't get the messages when they were called down from the bridge. So what I did is I took a string, tied it around my finger, and tied it on the clacker on the, so he gave me a citation for that. So he went from one event to the other by putting me on report and then giving me a citation for putting a string around my finger.
Were you always afraid that there might be an enemy lurking out in the open water?
Well, we always had to be aware of the enemy being anywhere, in the water, under the water, above the water, and everywhere else.
So what was the first place that you arrived at in service? I mean, overseas.
San Diego, California. I went there aboard the USS Saratoga CV-3, which is one of the oldest cargoes. Incidentally, the Saratoga CV-3 was sunk at Bikini at the atom bomb test. And it took 2 bombs to sink the Saratoga. All the other ships that were there, other country ships, were all sunk with the first atom bomb test. Likely, the Saratoga sunk right side up. So it made it very good for divers to go down and inspect. I never had the opportunity of going down below decks to see it while it was sunk, but it's quite an ordeal. And being aboard an aircraft carrier is just like being in a big city. Everything's available to you, from food to cleaning to exercise, movies, boxing. Everything is available to you on an aircraft carrier. The normal complement of the USS Saratoga CV-3 was from 4,000 to 4,500. That's without the air groups aboard. Now the carriers carry as many as 8,000. So it's just like being on a city.
Do you have any special memories of your serving on the Saratoga?
Yes. I made chief in 1942, and I was on the Saratoga at the time. And when you make chief petty officer in the Navy, you go through a ritual, initiation ritual. And what I was really appraised of, I had to go through a 4-foot metal tunnel. And in the tunnel was a lot of grease. And you had to make the other end of that tunnel, which was 10 foot long, in a specific period of time. Well, when you're crawling in grease, that's pretty difficult. And I'll never forget that. Incidentally, I did make it on time.
And did you ever feel claustrophobic from being on a ship?
I didn't understand the question.
Did you ever feel claustrophobic from being on a ship?
No.
Okay. Did you ever make any good friends on the Saratoga? Any friends on the Saratoga?
Yes, we used to have fights periodically when we're out of the war zone. And naturally, I always enjoyed movies. I've always enjoyed movies. And then we had programs for people who wanted to become entertainers out of the Navy. And that was very interesting. We had some very good singers. We had some acrobats and magicians. It was really, really something.
Did you play like any games or anything to keep you from boredom?
Mostly card games. I love to play cards. Still do. Primarily for money. We weren't allowed to do that aboard ship, play for money, but a lot of times when the commanding officer or the executive officer would come down to the chief's quarters, they always wanted to play for money. So we didn't have to worry about being on report because we had the 2 top officials there. So, needless to say, from my aspect of playing poker, neither one of the commanding officer or executive officer were very good poker players.
So what kinds of things did you do when you were on leave?
Mostly, I'm a non-drinker. I quit drinking at age 21. I used to go to the base thing I used to do when I went ashore was to go to the movies. I'd take in sometimes 2 or 3 movies in one evening. I didn't frequent bars because I didn't drink. And then after the Liberty was up, I went back to the ship. After you made chief, you could stay aboard overnight. And I had a lot of friends in California, specifically in the San Diego area and in the San Francisco area.
So where did you serve after you served on the Saratoga?
Well, I served on several ships. After I left the Saratoga, I went on the USS Savo Island, which was a jeep carrier, about a third of the size of a real aircraft carrier like we now have nowadays. And the spaces aboard a jeep carrier are much more restricted. I say that on a jeep carrier, I would classify the food better than it was on a big ship, especially in the chief's quarters. We always had first-class cooks that used to take care of the food in the chief's quarters.
Did you ever have any special missions that you had to go on?
Well, my special mission when I was on the admiral staff was assigning shore patrol to all of the chiefs who were assigned on that particular ship. I had that job on 2 different ships. I was an E7 at that time, and I assigned shore patrol to E8s. At that particular time, we didn't have E9s. They were later in the year. So that I enjoyed doing that because I served on Admiral Halsey, Admiral Nimitz, Admiral King, and Admiral I'll think of his name shortly. Admiral Halsey and Nimitz were my best bosses. Kimmel was the name of the other admiral, King and Kimmel.
Were you ever given a command at all in the Navy?
Yes, I was in charge, as I said, of all shore patrols. Also, when I went on shore duty, I was the leading chief of a squadron. And when I served on aircraft carriers in Moffett Field, California, which is in Southern California, I was the leading chief for the air group.
Did you ever feel honored at all to serve under Admiral Halsey?
Admiral Halsey was outstanding, one of the best admirals that I've ever had the pleasure of serving under. He was referred to as an enlisted man's admiral. He always looked after the enlisted men. Admiral Nimitz, as a general rule, you get the title of being a gentleman when you are an officer by an act of Congress. But Admiral Nimitz was a gentleman in a true sense of the word. He and his wife Margaret are buried in San Francisco at the Veterans Memorial Park there, and every time I go to San Francisco, I always go by and pay my respects to Admiral Nimitz and his wife Margaret.
So where did you first see combat?
December 7th, during the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Did you ever have to fight at all? Or were you
You mean using firearms?
Or were you kind of the person who hung back and gave orders?
Yes. Whenever you're a leading chief in a squadron or anywhere, you have to give orders, and you have to be diplomatic when you give orders, and there are a lot of chiefs in the Navy who were not diplomatic in doing so. Consequently, they had a quite difficult time giving orders.
What was fighting like in Japan? What was fighting like in Japan?
Well, actually, I didn't go ashore. All my responsibilities were on the aircraft carrier. although I did spend 16 years in Japan after I got out of the Navy. So I'm pretty familiar with Japan.
So tell me about some of the other places that you've been to. About why you were there and what you did at some of these other islands in the Pacific.
Well, I've been in Kodiak, Alaska. I've been to Okinawa. Been to Hawaii, Japan, Korea, France, Germany, to list a few. I've done a considerable amount of traveling.
Did you ever serve in Europe at all while you were in the Navy?
Served what?
Served in Europe? Or were you just stationed in the Pacific?
No, I served primarily in the Pacific, Eastern Hemisphere.
And were there any casualties in your unit during any battles at all?
Yes, when we received the torpedo in February 1942, we had a torpedo hit the lower deck and almost put us out of commission. And that was really the most serious battle that we were in as far as the battle in the Pacific was concerned.
Were any of your closest friends killed at all?
Yes, many of my personal friends, especially all those that worked in the lower deck, which were, we referred to them as black shoes, and the Airedales were referred to as brown shoes. And when we got the torpedo on the lower decks, a lot of my personal friends were killed as the torpedo ignited the bombs, and the bombs blew up, and it created quite a hectic situation.
So what did you get? I'm sorry. What were all these? I noticed that you have a lot of medals. Can you tell me about what some of them are and what you received them for?
Well, if you'll give me the name of the medal, I can tell you for what I received it.
The unit presential unit citation?
Yes, that was presented to me by Admiral Nimitz. It was a citation for outstanding work in the particular job that I had.
There's also the Navy Good Conduct Medal with the Silver Star?
Yes, I got 10 Good Conduct medals.
And
the silver represents 10.
you also got the Asiatic Pacific Campaign American Defense Medal?
Yeah, that was actually doing duty in the Pacific area.
There's also the National Defense Medal.
Basically the same. All of those who served in that area and participated in any of the battles received that particular medal.
And then there's also the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal.
Asiatic Pacific, that's serving in those two areas, combat areas.
And there's also the World War II Victory Medal.
Yes, that was awarded to everyone who was still in the Navy during the end of the war.
And the National Defense Service Medal?
Which one?
The National Defense Service Medal?
Yes, that was presented by an act of Congress for doing work other than having a Medal of Honor. It's almost, it's below the getting a Medal of Honor.
And the Korean Service Medal?
Yes, that was presented to me by one of the leading officers in Korea, and it was presented to me right here in Roseville.
And there's also the United States Medal and Korean Presidential Unit Citation Medal?
Yes, that was presented to me by Admiral Nimitz and signed at that time by the President of the United States.
So what was the highest rank you ever achieved in the service? Your highest rank that you received while in the service?
I was an E8 chief. E7 is the first rank, E7 is second, E9 is the highest rank you can attain.
And
I made E8 in 1945.
while in combat, did you ever save someone else's life?
No, I did not.
Did you keep any like memoirs of your traveling and your service?
Not what I did have. I through the years have lost them, or because I've done a lot of traveling and going from one place to another. I still have a few of my memorabilia that I received during the Navy, but nothing that is really anything that that should be shown to anyone. It's really personal.
When you were overseas in the Navy, how'd you keep in touch with your family back at home?
Letter writing, primarily. We didn't have computers in those days, and so naturally we couldn't use the internet. I wrote letters. I wrote to my wife a minimum of 3 times a week.
Did they send you anything? Did they send you any like gifts or anything while you were overseas?
Yes, my wife used to send me salami, cheese. She knew I loved salami, being an Italian.
And, do you recall when the day of your service ended? When you left the service?
That was in November of 1982.
Did you feel sad at all about leaving the Navy?
Yes, the first year that I was out, I felt kind of lost. It took me about a year to get acclimated to civilian life.
And do you still keep in touch with some of your friends who have also left the service?
Yes, there's not many of us left. The ones that I really were close to, we're all in the middle 80 bracket. So most of my close friends have passed away.
And do you join any reunions of any kind? Do you go to reunions with your fellow men?
Quite a few. I average about anywhere from 15 to 20 reunions a year. Ship, the Saratoga reunion we have yearly. I go to the parliamentary reunions. I go to the USS Arizona Memorial Service reunion in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm the only one that's made all 65 of them. I've been on the program there on Channel 13 for the last 10 years at the Arizona Memorial Services and at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
Would you mind giving me like a brief overview of your whole career in the service? Of your naval service, the time you spent in the Navy.
I cherish my time in the Navy, and if I had it to do over again, I would do it over again. As a matter of fact, I was contacted on my 60th birthday and asked if I'd like to go back on ship again, and I said no, but I'd be happy to take any desk job. And so I wound up getting a desk job in Washington.
And do you ever visit the places you went to in the Navy? I mean, now that you're out of the Navy, do you ever go back and visit those places where you served?
A few. I visited a couple of places in Japan. Of course, I spent 16 years in Japan after I got out of the Navy. I worked in special services there in Japan.
When you go to these places, do you ever take like a little reminder, like a handful of sand or anything?
No.
I was going to ask a few more questions. So tell me about some of the ships you served on.
I served on the Saratoga naturally. I was on the Savo Island. I was on the Lexington. I was on a couple of destroyers. Basically, in total, I was on about 14 different classes of ships.
What was it like at the Pearl Harbor Naval Station?
Well, that was good duty. I served that after the war, and the job that I had there was typically the same job that I have when I was aboard ship, and that was assigning shore patrol in that particular area.
What was the firefighting unit like in Tennessee? The firefighting unit?
Yes, I was in the firefighting unit. It was called crash car firefighting. We had firefighting equipment, and we traveled all over the United States to major bases. Our headquarters were in Memphis, Tennessee, and you know, as usual, when the government or the Navy assigns you to places, they send you to Alaska in the wintertime, and they send you to El Centro, California in the summertime. So you can imagine with having a full regalia of firefighting equipment on fighting fires in Yuma, Arizona in the summertime.
So which of these ships would you say that you enjoyed living on the most?
Probably the Savo Island. You had a lot closer relationships there, especially in the chief's quarters. Everybody knew everybody else. And the relationship was much closer on the smaller ships. Of course, when you're on a ship of 5,000, you only generally associated with those people who in your particular division.
Did you ever get any sleep at all on any of these ships? Did you ever get any sleep at all?
Any what?
Any sleep?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have a lot of lookout duty?
Oh, the longest I've ever gone without sleep is 5 days.
Yeah.
If I can get a couple hours sleep, I'm ready to go. Even right now, at my age, I only get about 5 or 6 hours sleep a night.
Did you ever do any top secret missions while you were in the Navy?
I had a top secret clearance, yes.
Can you describe any of those?
I can't divulge any of the
I'm sorry about that.
missions I were on, having a top secret clearance.
Do you remember any other missions that you went on?
Not particularly. I wouldn't call them missions. It was just another assignment.
Did you see any of the war in Europe?
No. The only time I spent in France or Germany was on recreation leave.
So, what exactly did you do in the war in Korea? The war in Korea?
I was on a battleship, or a seaplane tender at that time, small ship, and we had to fight some of the enemies that were on the coastal waters of Korea. I never got into actual Korea itself. We were only fighting the war on the waters off of Korea.
So were you fighting the Korean Navy, or were you fighting Korean ground troops actually in Korea?
No, mostly the foreign ships. You know, we fought against the ships that were in that particular area.
Were you a large force when you fought them?
Normally, the group that we were on was 2 carriers, 2 battle wagons, and about 4 or 5 destroyers.
Did you use any aircraft at all? Did you use any aircraft to fight them?
Oh, yes. Aircraft, that's the primary responsibility of the pilots on aircraft carriers, is to drop bombs on various areas that were held by the enemy.
Did you receive any awards or medals for the war in Korea?
The Korean citation I received from the government.
And did you ever feel proud to be in the Navy?
Absolutely.
And did you ever plan any assignments at all? Did you ever plan any assignments to go on in the war? I mean, did you plan any assignments yourself?
Yes.
Or were they
When
instead up to higher authority?
That's when I was in South America. I set up plans for groups to go ashore and on reconnaissance missions. I set up that plan. I was an E8 chief at that time.
Did you ever go on any assignments that failed at all?
No.
They all succeeded, pretty much.
No. Some of them were a little tougher than others, but we managed to be on the winning side about 95% of the time.
Was there ever a time when you were low on supplies or ammunition?
Yes.
And you felt that
several
you were
times.
about to die?
Usually when we were short of supplies is when the supply ships were attacked and sunk. And then we had to rely on other ships to furnish us with supplies. Never that problem on the carriers because we had ample supplies aboard. We could carry supplies for almost 6 months at a time. But on the smaller ships, we had to replenish about every 60 days.
So what kinds of transportation did they use to give supplies to you guys overseas?
Everything that a grocery store handles. And refrigerated material are handled on refrigerated ships. A lot of meat, a lot of cheese, milk. Those all come by refrigerated ships.
Did you ever get any Red Cross packages?
No. I hate to say it, I'm not a fond member of the Red Cross.
So what career did you do after the war?
When I got out of the Navy, I went, while I was stationed at Moffett Field, which is probably, where it's down in this area here, I went to Santa Clara University and received my law degree there. And I practiced law for 21 years. I was a corporate attorney, but 19 years with Atlantic Richfield. My sister was the GEO, secretary to the GEO, Mr. Green, so we had a pretty good job. And when the CEO passed away, my sister and I both quit.
Did you receive like a special honor when you went back to college for being in the service?
Not per se, not in the method that you stated.
Okay.
I got my diploma, and actually my LLB degree diploma.
Actually, and does your military experience influence your thinking about war or the military in general?
Did I what?
Does your experience in the service ever affect your thoughts on war or the U.S. military?
Not to that degree, no. I was very proud of my service. A lot of the parts of my service I don't like to describe or talk about, and I think that's understandable.
Do you visit any memorials at all?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think I mentioned the Arizona Memorial in Tucson, Arizona. I'm the only living person that's attended all 65 of them. The first one was held by the student union body, and then from the second one on, I've attended every one of them and been on television for the last, this will be the 11th year I've been on television. usually Channel 13 out of Phoenix.
So,
We average anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people attend that. It's always held on the closest weekend to the 7th of December.
do you still have your service uniform at all?
I do, and it fits me.
Do you still wear it at all?
Oh yes, all the activities, military activities, I'll probably be wearing it depending on what the others do at the dedication of the Veterans Memorial on the next Saturday on the 20th. When I wear it, people just get amazed at my 9 hash marks that I have in gold. That's about all that'll fit. I rate 11, but oh, I have to relay another incident to you that happened right down here in Moffett Field. I was the line chief, and I made assignments to airplanes to the pilots. So I had a Lieutenant J.G. come out one day, and he said, "Chief, I want that particular plane there." I said, "I'm sorry, I can't let you have that plane. It's not safe to fly." Well, he said, "I want it anyway." I said, "Well, you're not going to get it, Lieutenant. If you want it, to do anything about it, you'll have to go see the commanding officer." "Well, I'm putting you on report." I says, "Thank you, sir." So I went to see the commanding officer, and he says, "Don't worry about the report." He was put in hack for 30 days. He didn't get to fly the plane either. Well, that was something that I knew more about than he did. He did the flying, and I did handling the people that did the maintenance. And that plane was not safe to fly.
How about if you tell me about some of these partner organizations that you're with? These partner organizations that you're with, like the Knights of Columbus. And
I'm a 4th degree Knights of Columbus. I've been Knights of Columbus for 36 years, 45 years, I'm sorry. I've been a 4th degree 36 years. I'm a DTM Toastmasters, which is a distinguished Toastmaster. And I've been a Toastmaster for over 60 years.
And there's also the American Institution of...
That AIP, American Institute of Parliamentarians,
Yeah.
that's a parliamentary organization. I did teach parliamentary procedure, which is teaching people how to make motions, how to run meetings. I've been doing that for almost 45 years. And the other organization was the AARP, which is the Academy of Parliamentary Procedure and Law, which is parliamentary procedure which is affiliated with civil law.
And also the Retired Police Officers Association? The Retired Police Officers Association?
Yes, I was, when I was stationed in Yuma, Arizona, I was an alternate policeman in El Centro, California. So after I've been approached to join the association, I've belonged to that association for now almost 60 years.
Were you ever a Boy Scout? Were you ever a Boy Scout?
To my disgrace, I have never been a Boy Scout. I wish I had been. After I've seen what the Boy Scouts do, I think it's one of the most proudest organizations that I have to speak of.
Were any of your friends in the service like Eagle Scouts at all?
Did what?
Were any of your friends in the service Eagle Scouts at all, or Boy Scouts?
Oh, a lot of them Boy Scouts. I don't have any close relationships of any Eagle Scouts until he approached me, and Nick, and he was really the first one. I was really amazed at the patches that he has.
In a veterans organization, what kinds of activities does your post or association have? In a veterans organization, what are some of the activities that you do?
In the Navy or out of the Navy?
No, in a veterans organization. In a veterans organization, what exactly do you do? What kind of activities do you do in a veterans organization?
I didn't understand the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was this referring to Puerto Rico?
No, veterans organizations?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
What kinds of activities did you do in these organizations?
Well, the Fleet Reserve Association, for one, and I've been in it 65 years. I was a national parliamentarian, and from 84 to 86, I was a regional vice president of the Southwest region, which is in the San Diego area. And I've been president of about 6 different branches. I held the office of secretary, office of treasurer, and I just finished a 2-year tenure in branch 230 of the Fleet Reserve Association, which we meet in this hall.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill at all?
No, I went to Santa Clara University on my own while I was stationed at Moffett Field. A good Catholic university, incidentally.
How did your service and experiences affect your life? How did your experience in the Navy affect your life, would you say?
Well, I'll quote my mother. Before you went in the Navy, you weren't a very neat individual. When you took your socks off, that's where they stayed. When you took your clothes off, that's where they stayed. And she couldn't believe how I learned these attributes in the Navy. Now my socks have to be folded, my underwear has to be folded, not necessarily ironed, but folded. And I put them away in the drawer. But my wife, she has learned the Navy system of folding underwear.
And, so now you've...
At times you'll notice that I like humor. And my personal opinion of humor, I think that this world would be very dull if there wasn't a little bit of humor. And believe it or not, after I got out of the service, that was one of the hardest things for me to learn, was to be humorous.
Throughout your entire naval career, do you remember any like funny stories at all? Or any little incidents that happened that seemed funny?
I'm glad you asked that question, and we'll refer back again to the aircraft carrier CV-3. I worked for a fellow, as you know, indicated to you earlier, I was the voice tube operator. And Lieutenant Perrault was about that flight deck officer. When all the ships were off, either going to fly to another base or when they were out on missions, he would take 4 or 5 sailors and he'd tell them to get back on the aft end of the ship. He says, "You 6 sailors are airplanes, and I'm going to give you signals. Now, when I tell you to do this, I want you to start revving up your engines. Just go brrr, like that. And you'll get an idea about this fellow. Then I'm going to give you a motion to taxi forward. And when I do, I want you to taxi forward at a brisk speed." You did that pretty well. I give you credit. Now, we just had an accident on a flight deck, and this plane was damaged, so we're going to take it down on the elevator to the next deck. I'm going to put one of you on each corner of the elevator to make sure that you don't have any further damage attributed to this airplane. So the airplane got about halfway, he hit the emergency stop, and he looked at the seaman down there, and he says, "What in the H-E-double-L is the matter with you? Didn't you see that wing hit the bulkhead?" And he said, "No, I did not. I'm sorry, sir." That's just a few of the things. Another time, he was a quarterdeck officer on the flight deck, and we were anchored out of San Diego, California. Well, he stood there imitating hitting a golf ball out of the hatch toward the city of Long Beach. He looked at me, he says, Tony, he said, "Did you see I just hit that buoy out there?" No club, no ball, nothing. Another incident that you might think was very funny, he had a 1936 Lincoln car, He used to drive up Long Beach Boulevard in Long Beach. He'd pull to a stop, throw his wife's purse out there and holler, "Abandon ship," and he'd clock her. And she had to be back to the car within 25 seconds. So, also, another thing that he did that is this is a humorous aspect of the service. He was a flight instructor at Pensacola, Florida. And he used to tell these pilots, he says, you know, we've got good maintenance people, and you've got to rely on their safety efforts. So he says, well, I agree to that. So he went out to one of the planes and started taxiing down to the hangar. And he waited till he got about 10 feet from the hangar, and then he hit the brakes. Well, naturally, the momentum of the plane went right through the hangar. So he didn't get much higher than a lieutenant commander. We never did hear later on in life how he died. We don't know whether he was an accident or what, but we lost track of him. But he was a great guy to be around if you wanted to be humorous. Lieutenant Gerald A. Peralt. One other thing. I hope you're enjoying this humor aspect. When we used to go to San Diego, a lot of the sailors used to get tailor-made uniforms where they had bottoms, you know. So he had a 16-inch pair of shears whenever he stood deck on the flight deck. And if one of the sailors went ashore and he saw that they had these tailor-mades on, he'd cut the bottom 6 inches off of the tailor-mades. And those things used to cost, at that time, about $35, $40, which back in the early 40s was a lot of money. So he ruined a lot of good uniforms. Now let's get back to the serious aspect.
Were you ever court-martialed at all?
I was only put on report one time, and that was by that Lieutenant J.D. in Moffett Field. It's the only time.
Can you tell me what happened, or do you not feel comfortable with telling me?
That's the one I mentioned. Came out and wanted the airplane. I wouldn't give it to him.
Oh.
And he put me on report. That's the only time I've ever been put on report in 46 years.
So is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Do what?
Is there anything else you'd like to add in this interview that we've not covered?
You might have noticed there that I did some duty down in Roosevelt Field, which is just outside of Puerto Rico. And basically what that field was, we provided ships and targets for these ships to practice on off the Roosevelt roads. And that's how the pilots got their bombing practice in that particular area. It's since closed now. The Puerto Ricans wish they had it back, but Roosevelt Roads has long been decommissioned. Are any of the other scouts authorized to ask questions, or do you do all the interviews?
So do you do interviews now? Do you ever share with anybody about your experiences in interviews or TV shows or anything?
Only when I'm around a group of people who served in the service, not necessarily with the civilian aspect. I feel that what I did in the service was for our country, and I don't like to talk about the things that we did only with other veterans who served, because they understand. Some people wouldn't understand what we were talking about.
And I'm sorry. While you were in the Navy, did you ever feel any pressure or stress at all? Were there any tiring experiences that you?
In relating to those two particular words, no. There were times when I was a little bit scared, but no pressure.
Did you ever chicken out under fire during your first battle?
Well, actually, the largest battle that I anticipated was when the Saratoga was torpedoed. Because 90% of my duty in the Navy was on ships. I only served in 2 shore duty stations, one in Alameda and one in San Diego.
Do other members of your family are other members of your family involved in the service at all?
My father has since passed away. He served in the Italian Navy, but he died when he was 42. Both of my parents have deceased. I have the only family I have now living is I have 3 sisters. I'm the oldest.
So what did you think of your fellow officers and fellow men when serving?
Well, as I indicated earlier, I respected Admiral Halsey, Admiral Nimitz, Admiral King, and Admiral. I had no respect for either one of them because you never knew from one day to the other whether they were going to be go by the book or whether they didn't care. And it's very difficult to serve under an admiral who you don't know whether he's going to be strict that day or whether he's just going to wing it as we go along. But as a general rule, 95% of the officers I served under, I had ultimate respect for.
Did you ever sacrifice your life? Did you ever put your life at risk to save someone else? Or did someone do the same to you while you were serving?
The only time I ever did is we had a plane came in, again on the Saratoga. He missed the resting gear and went into the barriers. And I thought that he was seriously injured, so I ran up, climbed up on the plane and helped other people get him out. And he hit his head against the windshield when he hit the barriers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tonelli. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name.
Tonelli?
Tonelli. Thank you, Mr. Tonelli, for joining us.
Okay.
And
It's been a pleasure.
thank you very much.
I hope that you understand that there are a lot of facets of my military career that I can't discuss.
Well, I understand. Well, thanks for participating in the Veterans History Project.
And thank you.
Yeah.
I want to congratulate you.
Yeah, my name is Philip Thorne from Troop 107.